Hauss Hejny is in the transfer portal. TCU is rolling with Josh Hoover in 2025. We'll talk about it next year on Locked On Horned Frogs.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, I'm your host, Steven Simcox. Another bonus episode because Hauss Hejny is in the transfer portal. That's right, true freshman quarterback. He's not going to play in the New Mexico Bowl game, according to Steven Johnson. Multiple reports out there that he is planning to enter the transfer portal. And unless TCU can convince him to not make this move and withdraw his name, he will be at another school next season. Legacy players, parents are both athletes at TCU. It was a huge deal when they landed him, four-star quarterback from Aledo, local kid. All those things would make you think, hey, this is a guy that hopefully would be patient and stick around, but it did not work out for this coaching staff and for this team. Now, in the short term, obviously Josh Hoover is your starter. Adam Schobel, four-star quarterback, will be coming in this upcoming season, but this is still a real bummer. And I said on social media this afternoon, I think the toughest job in sports right now is keeping a young, highly rated or talented quarterback on your roster. I think it's the toughest thing to do in sports at this very moment. If you have a young QB who is talented and they are not playing and there is someone in front of them, it is very, very difficult to keep them around. And there are a few examples that you might throw out there. Yes, Texas, Arch Manning, still there. He's going to be the dude next year. Georgia has a few of those guys. Oregon with that Nike money. But this is something that's going on across the country. Now, it really stings with Hauss for a number of reasons. He's immensely talented. He did get to play this year. It wasn't like he was riding the pine the entire season, but TCU put him in running situations every time he was on the field. He did not attempt to pass this year, and he ended up with 15 carries for 65 yards, came in and iced the game against Kansas, came in and iced the game against Cincinnati, had some moments here and there in some other ball games this past year, but for the most part, he was a backup to Josh Hoover. He got injured against Stanford after a short carry, and that kept him out for a few weeks. But when he was healthy, he was a part of what they did, even if it was somewhat in a limited basis. Now, I did have a conversation with someone who knows Hauss's family really well a couple weeks ago. I guess it was after the Cincinnati game. And they told me at that time they would be surprised. They basically just communicated to me people weren't happy. People around him weren't happy, and they wouldn't be surprised if he tested the waters and went in the portal. I didn't really say anything about it at the time because, I mean, it was hearsay. It was like this person told me this, and then I heard it through the grapevine. Plus, it wasn't directly from him, so I didn't totally know what to make of it. And what was communicated to me was basically it wasn't so much the lack of playing time that was upsetting as it was the way that they used him when he was on the football field, which I didn't get more details than that, but my assumption was maybe they just didn't like that he didn't get a chance to throw the ball. You know, they'd throw him out there on a 1st and 10 play, and then he would immediately come out. He was never really able to get any sort of rhythm. It wasn't like him and Josh were trading series. But, I mean, I kind of understood what the plan was because he was essentially a short yardage or hey, we need to get numbers in the run game. We're in an obvious rushing situation. Let's put him out there, and we can do some different things with him and his athleticism and his ability to run the ball. But it felt like first in the New Mexico Bowl, there was an opportunity possibly for him to get in there and make some plays and do some things and throw the ball around a bit. And then going into next year, Josh Hoover was your obvious starter, but there was sort of a thought in the back of my mind, do they open up that package a little bit more? Savion Williams is leaving. He emerged as like a wildcat QB at the end of the season. I know that's not Hauss's aspiration, but there were some cool things that you could do with him at QB, and it would be a change of pace from what Josh does, obviously, because Josh is not a super mobile guy. That now appears that it will not be the case as he is entering the transfer portal and will be looking for a new roster. I don't really know what the coaching staff could have done to prevent this, though. Because, yeah, I love Hauss. I think he's awesome. I hope it works out for him at his next stop. but you're not going to bench. I mean, Josh Hoover had issues with turnovers this year. He threw 10 picks. He also threw 23 touchdowns. He threw for 3,697 yards. He commanded an offense that essentially had no running game the first half of the season. They were 3-3. He was a big part of that turnaround. The team seems to love him. It feels like all the intangible stuff. He checks all the boxes. So the biggest thing that I take away from this, and I'm not saying you have to agree with this approach or this opinion, but this is me telling you what I believe the staff is thinking, and based on their decision-making, it's pretty obvious what's going on here. They have now had multiple opportunities over the past few years to turn the reins over to somebody else at quarterback. Chandler Morris gets hurt. Josh Hoover comes in. At the time, we didn't really know much about him at all, other than he played at Rockwall Heath. He was really good in that offense under Mike Spradlin, and he came over late in the process. He was supposed to go to Indiana. Sonny Dykes gets the job at TCU. They connect. He ends up with the Frogs, right? He did a nice job in that back half of the season. But when the season was over, in fact, actually, let me back up a second. During that run in the back half of the season when he was the starter, Chandler Morris told Dave Campbell's Texas Football that in that Texas game, when Josh made some really bad decisions in the first half, and at halftime they come in the locker room and I don't know everything that was said, but there was a moment where it was kind of kicked around. Okay, should we give Chandler another shot at this? Should we say, hey, Josh, thanks, but you're going to take a seat now? And should we let Chandler just give it a go in the second half, let it rip and see where he's at and see what he can do? And ultimately, they decided to stick with Josh Hoover. And in Chandler's mind, in that moment, he said, okay, I guess they've made their decision. They're moving on from me and they're going with him. This offseason, if they wanted to, they could have gotten in the portal and been aggressive at going and getting a quarterback. And I talked a lot this offseason about there's kind of two approaches that you could take here with your NIL money and your resources. You could go pay big money for another QB and tell Josh, hey, thank you, man, for what you've done. Thanks for getting us through the end of that season, but we're going a different direction, and go your merry way. Or you could do what they ended up doing, which is say to yourself, all right, let's go allocate some resources to build the team around this new quarterback. Let's restructure the offensive line. Get our skill players in order, get this team built in a way that will make Josh Hoover successful. That's what they ended up doing. They went and got Ken Seals, but I don't think there was any idea that Ken Seals was going to be a starter. Josh takes over this year, and I feel like whether it was explicitly stated to Hauss and his family before the season, or if it was just kind of what Hauss was thinking in his mind, there was this belief of, okay, you have an unproven starter. He's going to be the guy in 2024, but he doesn't have a great track record of success. So there's a world where he struggles, it doesn't work out, and then in 2025, I have the chance to step in and be the dude. But that doesn't materialize. Instead, Josh Hoover takes the reins, does a really good job, and he is firmly entrenched as a starter for next year. And by the way, I mean, it doesn't look like he's a surefire NFL pick. So I think there's a decent chance that for the next 2 seasons, if he stays healthy and things keep going down this track, he could be your starter for the next 2 seasons. So I think this is as simple as playing time. He looked at the roster, he looked at the depth chart and said, I don't want to sit for 3 years. And I can't really fault Hauss for that. He's a super talented dude. He's been a very good quarterback and a very good player for a long time. He was an Elite 11 finalist. All the things. He won state titles at Aledo. I get it. He wants to go somewhere else and play. The only thing I would say about it is I wish the staff could say, hey, could you just give us one more year? Could you give us one more opportunity, one more year to just see how this goes? Because a lot of things can happen. There have been seasons where we've gone into a TCU football season thinking this is going to be the QB. And something goes wrong, something happens, and all of a sudden somebody's thrust in that role. That's what happened to Josh, right? Chandler Morris was supposed to be the guy. We were all talking about how great he was going to be. And this is different because Chandler had, one game of true success coming into that year. But at the same time, like, he was the unquestioned starter, and then he ends up getting hurt, and Josh takes a chance and runs with it. Now, I think this is different because of what Josh has done throughout the 18 games that he started. But I wish they could have somehow said, man, could you just give us one more season? Maybe Josh lights it up this year and he says, you know what? I've been in school for 4 years. I've put up outstanding numbers on the football field. I feel like I've done everything I can do. I'm going to roll the dice and take a chance at the NFL. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work. But I don't see myself locking into one more season here. I think I can go to the next level. And then it's suddenly your job. So in the short term, yes, they'll be fine. But this still is a real bummer just because there was an opportunity that you would have had 3 outstanding quarterbacks, one guy that's done it, 2 guys that were the future of the program moving forward on the roster this next season. Now that's not going to be the case. And I really like Adam Schobel, but he's very different than Hauss. The exciting thing about Hauss to me was he kind of fits the bill of what you're looking for and what Kendall Briles likes to do. He can run, he can make plays with his feet, and yes, he's also got the arm talent. But now we're not going to get to see that. And I mean, it's unfortunate. And I think we can put some blame on the coaching staff, but I'm struggling to find like what they should have done differently, short of saying, hey, that's your job, which there's not a world where you could do that based on what we know right now. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll get back to this topic here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Gametime, check it out. Download the Gametime app today. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first order. You'll get to see exactly what your view is going to be when you sit down in your seat. They show you a picture. It's fantastic. Gametime. It's easy to access. Tickets go straight to your app. You don't have to wonder where they are. No hidden fees. They tell you exactly up front what you're going to pay. Download the Gametime app today. Best app on the secondary ticket market. So, yeah, I mean, Hauss Hejny moving on in the transfer portal. I can't say it's completely shocking, but it's disappointing. I understand the decision. It's disappointing because I really wanted him to be a frog. I wanted to see what he could do in this offense. And it now puts a lot of pressure on, the staff and what they're going to do in the future. Sure, you got Adam Schobel coming in. I really like Adam, but he'll be a true freshman this year. And so now does he end up being your number 2 QB? Does Ken Seals come back? I think you probably need to go investigate in the portal and say, hey, can we find a veteran QB who kind of understands the deal, that they're not going to be the starter, but they can hold a clipboard, they can be in the meeting rooms, they can be a good presence. I feel like also what this points out, and it's part of why I think people are frustrated with college football. I don't know what the solution is. I know personally, a lot of you probably very familiar with Hauss. You watched him play. You were super excited about him being here. He's a legacy. All that pointed to some true excitement and juice around his journey as a TCU football player. Now that's cut short. And, I think everybody's just making the right decision that they can, the best decision they can for themselves. I feel like there's this false narrative that goes around when we talk about college sports now. And everybody's like, well, it's just these kids are just entitled and it's a microwave generation. And I get that. But I certainly don't think that's the case here. And I think in general, it's not really that these kids are entitled. College football has become a business. It's always been that way to a certain extent, but now more than ever. It's essentially a semi-pro league. And all these young men, if you look at recruiting interviews and see what these guys are saying, pretty much all of them, their dream is to play in the NFL. And that's not a bad dream. I'm not faulting anyone for having high aspirations. We all know the numbers, though. A lot of them won't. But if you want to play in the NFL, if you want to play at the next level, once you get on campus, the clock kind of starts, and you got to put something on film. And I think especially at the QB position, where it's not like you're going to rotate in and out a lot. There's only one spot on the field. There's just a ton of pressure. If you don't see a clear path to playing time, there's so much pressure on you individually to say, well, how much longer can I wait? I can't wait 3 years for this to materialize. I have to go make something happen now. And I think that's what happened here. It's unfortunate for TCU, but it's just the reality of it. On Monday, we'll have a lot of discussion. Jordan Dwyer, big-time wide receiver from Idaho. He signed with TCU. Also, Kamarion Pimpton, tight end from LSU. But I wanted to get this out here on the weekend, one, just because it's huge news, but also I sort of wanted to focus more on the additions to the roster on Monday, but I didn't feel like I could open the show on Monday and not address this. So kind of doing a standalone episode. We'll talk more about it on Monday. Feel free to hit me up in the comments or on Twitter at SimcockSteven. Always excited to hear your opinions or what you have to say. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast.